I will briefly conclude by returning again to the freedom at midnight. The concept of freedom at midnight जो मैंने यहाँ पे लिया है, this concept comes from the Jawaharlal Nehru's speech that came in our parliament on the midnight of 14th of August, जो कि रात को 12 बजे उन्होंने Rise with Destiny speech दिया था. This is world famous, very famous speech, Rise with Destiny. So I have included that speech in our presentation, and I will try to emphasize that speech in this discussion. Then we have discussion and references. So I would like this session should be interactive, and the government of India हमें एक मौका भी दिया आज़ादी का अमृत महोत्सव, which is being celebrated for whole 1.5 years. So this is an opportunity for us to recognize, celebrate our independence, our freedom, our development over the past 75 years. What are the issues, the problem of corruption? So this is an opportune moment for us to deliberate on this subject. So obviously I would be looking for an interactive session here, so that the communication is not unidirectional, rather it should be bidirectional. So let's start with the freedom at midnight. So अगर आप भारत के इतिहास को, फिर वर्ल्ड के इतिहास को देखिए, 1940 का डिकेड जो है, इट इज द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट डिकेड इन आवर रिसेंट ह्यूमन हिस्ट्री. पिछले 200 साल के इतिहास में भी देख लीजिए, इनफैक्ट आप 250 साल पुराना इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन को भी देख लीजिए, बट 1940 का जो डिकेड है, इट इज़ द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट. इसने हमारी मॉडर्न लाइफ को सेव किया है, वर्ल्ड लाइफ को भी सेव किया है, इंडियन लाइफ को भी सेव किया है. वर्ल्ड लाइफ को कैसे सेव किया? 1939 से पहले जो वर्ल्ड आइडियाज थे, दे वर नॉट डेमोक्रेसी, दे वर नॉट ह्यूमन राइट्स. आज हमारे दुनिया के 210 देशों में से 200 देशों में डेमोक्रेसी की बात होती, ह्यूमन राइट्स की बात होती, बट इट वाज नॉट सो बिफोर 1940. देयर वर मोस्ट ऑफ द मोनार्कीज थी, कॉलोनाइज्ड कंट्रीज थी. ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट का एक ऐसा दबदबा था पूरी दुनिया पर कि उनका सूर कहीं नहीं डूबता था, ऐसा उनके बारे में बोला जाता था. कॉलोनीज नॉट ओनली ब्रिटिश, फ्रेंच थी, इंडोनेशिया था, डच था, पोलिश कॉलोनीज थी. तो देयर वर मीन्स द आइडिया इन विच द वर्ल्ड वाज लिविंग वाज समथिंग डिफरेंट. बट 1940 के डिकेड के बाद रैपिडली वर्ल्ड बिकम डेमोक्रेटिक. वी स्टार्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट ह्यूमन राइट्स. तो ये एक रेवोल्यूशन का टाइम था. सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वार ने हमें बहुत कुछ सिखाया, और सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वार के बाद जो इंस्टीट्यूशंस खड़े हुए, आज पोस्ट वर्ल्ड वार 2 इंस्टीट्यूशन आज पिछले 75 साल से पूरे वर्ल्ड को रूल कर रहे हैं, वेदर इट दे आर ब्रेटन वुड्स इंस्टीट्यूशन लाइक IMF, वर्ल्ड बैंक, यूनाइटेड नेशंस, और in the field of politics also. Even if you talk about the global politics was also shaped by the Second World War. The world got divided into 2 blocks, Cold War, and then ultimately the hegemony of United States starts. So then if we go on the world history, then it will be a altogether different topic. But in the brief, I would say the 1940 decade is the deciding factor in the history of world and in the history of India. In case of India, if we talk about India, our freedom struggle started. The real freedom struggle started from the Jallianwala Bagh hotyaकांड. The massacre at Jallianwala Bagh was the turning point in Indian freedom struggle. From there starts the real thinking that we want independent India. Otherwise, before that, we were content, kind of, we were happy with the situation. We were not looking to. No, British rule is not benevolent. No, British rule is not good for the country. The thinking changed from the Jallianwala Bagh hotyaकांड, and then the Mahatma Gandhi also resolutely decided that no, this country cannot be in the hands of Britishers, and this has to be self-ruled. The freedom struggle started, but Britishers were not in any mood to give independence to India. Even in coming 200 years, they were not in any mood. In fact, 1940 तक भी Britishers were not in any mood to give freedom to India. So 1940 आया, Second World War start हो गया, Hitler started the Second World War, and now Hitler is bombing Britain. Hitler is attacking along with Japan and Italy all across the world, the England and combined forces of United States and USSR. So the situation rapidly changed against the tide turned against British government. ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट जो कि वर्ल्ड सुपर पावर था 1940 में, नाउ इट वाज रिड्यूस एज अ वेरी वेरी माइन्यूट पावर बाय द एंड ऑफ 1945। उनकी सिचुएशन बहुत ख़राब हो गई, उन्होंने बहुत बड़ा लॉस सहा, उनका लंदन और उनके बड़े बड़े शहर सब बॉम्बार्ड हो चुके थे, दे वर ऑल एंडेड, एंड सो द फ्रीडम Britishers then decided Britishers were not able to hold their colonies. They were not able to hold their colonies, and as they were incapable of holding their colonies, so British government were not in position to control India from Britain, because they were ultimately 1 lakh people who were ruling this country of 30 crore at that time. And then our freedom struggle was also picking up from the Quit India movement, and Quit India movement was the final blow in the hand of in their hand of British governments. So from 1940 to 1945, you may count, the freedom struggle ends. The freedom struggle takes the turning point, and India becomes free. By the end of 1945, we were knowing that now India is going to get free. And then the real problem begins. Real problem was of the integration of the country, and this is where the role of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel comes. Actually, sir, if we see the life of a nation from 1940 to 1947 or 48, we will see there are 4 prominent figures. At least five. I will not say 4. I will say 5. Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi is fighting for the freedom struggle. Jawaharlal Nehru, he is looking altogether a different agenda, foreign relations, how the country is going to be developed. Then there is Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, he is looking for the unification of country. And then Subhash Chandra Bose is looking to get independence and through the use of war. And then there is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was playing a very very significant role in the country. He is looking for the socio-economic development, the socio-economic equality of the country. In this backdrop, the importance of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel comes. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was an ardent follower of Mahatma Gandhi. In fact, if we see, he was left hand of Mahatma Gandhi and the right hand was Jawaharlal Nehru. महात्मा गांधी के लेफ्ट हैंड और राइट हैंड सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल और जवाहरलाल नेहरू हैं, और अब नाउ द रियल टास्क ऑफ नेशन बिल्डिंग स्टार्ट्स. What are the challenges of the? No, I'm okay. And if there is any discussion within itself, then it will be good. Or first I will finish it and then we will discuss. Actually, Ajay Chauhan sir has given me a lot of time. I am also not interested to extend it by this, because talking about history and then talking about vigilance, then talking about integrity, so it will all get mixed up. So I am just trying to create a little background on the issue, and then we will come to the topic. So then I am just talking about the relevance of today, and today is birthday of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, so I am talking about his contribution. So kindly please pay attention to what I am saying. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel belonged to a family, a modest family from Gujarat, and his upbringing happened in a rural agrarian background. Now he gets interested in the politics, and he becomes a farm leader. He was associated with Mahatma Gandhi in his Kheda Satyagraha, which was in 1918, and from there he takes the experience of Satyagraha or organizing people, agitation, and then he leads a Satyagraha by himself in Bardoli in 1928, which was a very important Satyagraha. If you turn down the history of India, you will see the Bardoli has its own place. It is like a Champaran Satyagraha of 1917. So now Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel becomes Sardar from 1928. He develops his own idea of economic and political freedom in 1931 in fundamental resolution at Karachi resolution, which is called a Congress. So he he resolved, he was doing the presidency of Congress in 1931, which is very important Congress session which happened in Karachi, and he is scripting the future of India in 1931. Let me pause here and say future of India. Congress, along with Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and Jawaharlal Nehru, was scripting the future of India in 1931 at Karachi, and they resolved the fundamental economic and social policy which has been enshrined in Constitution of India. This country will be a democracy. This country is going to have equal vote, one person, one value. This was resolved in 1931, way back in 16 years before India's independence. So you see the idea, the thinking of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. He is leading a Congress all across in its peasant agitation in 1936. In 1942, Quit India movement, he is leading Quit India movement, although he was imprisoned before the movement actually started on 8th of August 1942, but he was the driving force behind it. And his real role starts from 1946. Now it's clear that India is going to get independent in a matter of years. In January 1948, British Prime Minister Clement Attlee declared that we are not going to rule India any more than 1 year. So by 1948, we will free India. But suddenly the riots happen in the country, the Hindu-Muslim riots start happening, and Britishers are looking really at their responsibility. They are thinking, no, actually, these rights, we cannot manage these rights because the civil service, its authority has been deteriorated to that extent that people are not counting police for civil service. Right? There cannot be any control over the right. Only one person who can. There was only one person in the country who could control the riots. He was Mahatma Gandhi. Wherever he went, the riots stopped. But how can a single person can control this big country? Police is not working, civil service is not working, army is incapable. And in that movement, Britishers also decided, no, we cannot rule India for next 1 year. I think we should leave immediately as possible, as quick as possible. And then comes the 3rd June plan of Mountbatten, which is history, 1947, 3 June 1947. And Mountbatten decides that, okay, we are going to partition India in 2 parts, and we are going to leave India by 14th and 15th of August 1947. So you see the time, hardly 6 months. And in this period, the country has to be divided. If such a big country has to be divided among 2 parts, the India and Pakistan, the boundaries have to be divided. So they said the commission, boundary commission, that is Radcliffe Commission, they said. And now the problem of the integration of country starts. Country is so big, there are 565 small states all across the country, and these states were not associated with the British government. They are independent, kind of independent states. They are only sharing foreign relations, communication, and external affairs with the defense with the country, and rest it's all independent. They are ready. They are free to rule their country and in their own way. So now the real task begins, and in July 1947, the States Department was established. The States Department is responsible for the integration of country, and who is given the responsibility of integrating the country in States Department? Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. So he adopts the 2 strategies. The first strategy is he plays that was, if we say from individual perspective, that was kind of you may say a bait. He offered a bait to princes. Okay, if you want to integrate with India, if you get integrated with India, we will assure your defense, we will assure your communication, we will assure your external affairs, but you will be free to rule your states in your own way beyond this. So, but princes also get happy. Okay, we were not having these things before Indian independence as well, because Britishers were only giving autonomy in their internal affairs but not in external affairs. So British princess gets ready, okay, we will do it. So why 1947, 15th of August, except 3 states, that is Junagadh, Hyderabad and Kashmir. All 565 states get integrated in the country because of whose role, who played this vital role. Otherwise this country would have been Europe. This country's size is like Europe. 32 lakh square kilometer area this country is having. This country is having this much diversity that European diversity is lesser than this country. But Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel integrates those 565 states before 1945, 15th of August 1945 into a single union. And from the parliament on the midnight of 1947, 15th of August, Jawaharlal Nehru delivered that famous speech that tries with destiny. I would urge all of you to read that speech because that is India, that is the vision of India, that is how we have lived for 75 years in India, and everything is related and connected to this speech. Whether you say public sector, the government service, civil service, this speech is inspiration for everyone because this is the future of India. This is the vision of India. So I have included this Tries with Destiny speech in my, which was delivered on 15th of August. It was extempore. Jawaharlal Nehru was not prepared for this speech. He just went and gave this speech because he was such a kind of intellectual person that there was no match for him to him in the world at that time. He was such kind of person. So he says, long year ago we made a try with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our place, not whole or in fully measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. And a moment comes which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from old to new, when an age ends and when the soul of nation long suppressed finds utterance. It is fitting that at this solemn moment we take the pledge of dedication to the service of India and her people and to the still larger cause of humanity. Actually, if you decrypt this speech, this speech has been researched over the years in Harvard and Oxford. People have done PhD on this speech, that how this speech became so influential. It is one of the most influential speech in world history. If we count famous speeches in the world history, so what I can say, the Lincoln speech, Abraham Lincoln speech in 1960 at the in the time of civil war in America, and he said that we want a single country, we don't want to divide, and he ultimately succeeds in preventing the division of America. And then there are such speeches which become history in the world history or politics. One such speech is Martin Luther King's speech in 1960s, and when he was leading a black people movement in America. So I would urge to complete this speech, although I am not going to finish it, but I will come to it at the end of this session. I will once again return to it. But the point here is that what he is asking, what he is seeing the new dawn is there, the new morning is there, and this is a new beginning for the country. Let us forget the past, let us look to the future. And what is the future? The future is, this is 30 crore. At that time, India was having population of 30 crore. This is the service, making the India and making, to create a service to 30 crore people of the India, and then taking this speech in his mind, he creates the temples of modern India. What are temples of modern India? Jawaharlal Nehru was behind the creation of public sector in this country. He created the Indian Institute of Technology, ONGC, NTPC, all these public sectors were the brainchild of Jawaharlal Nehru. Fail. From where the inspirations come? The inspiration comes from this speech, that he wanted to create a structure, a framework, such institutions which will serve to the service of country, whose purpose was the development, the poverty eradication, employment, lots of factors for the benefit of this country. And from here the journey of the public sector starts. Before jumping into the public sector, I will briefly talk about the idea of India, because the public sectors are somewhere are there to promote and propagate the idea of India. What is idea of India? Actually, every individual, whether we say individual or society or country, they are working behind some philosophy. They have from their own philosophy. A single person, let's say I have a philosophy of my life, right? You have a philosophy of your life. You have some values for which you will cherish, and you will try that those values should not diminish. Similarly, a country also have such values. What are the idea of India? India is not a new country. India, although India is a new state, but it is not a new nation. I hope you understand the difference between nation and state. Nation is about people. It starts from Sindhu Valley civilization, or even before that. It continues to the Vedic age, it continues to Maurya, the Guptas, the Harsa, then the Chauhan rulers, the Sultanates come, the Mughals come, the Britishers come. No, India was a nation. It was a nation since 5,000 years old. We know it is not a new nation, but it is a new state. The state was established on 15th of August 1947, the state of India in which we are living. It is a political system which has been established very recently, 75 years old. But as far as nation is concerned, we are very old people. So what is idea of Indian nation? This is what I am trying to decode, I am trying to speak. If you look for the idea of Indian nation, if you just delve into some good books, I would suggest is one of the books which I have gone through is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's Discovery of India. If you want to know the idea of India, I would suggest that you should go through that book, because that is a real. I found it very relevant in promoting the idea of India, because he speaks from that perspective. Recently, also some professors have written some very wonderful book, like there is Sunil Khilnani who wrote Idea of India only, and he has a BBC telecast series also, some 50 lectures are there, and he speaks so at length about idea of India. So idea of India is a very broad concept. It's very difficult to compress it into this short session. But there are many contributors to the idea of India. Who are the contributors? The contributors, if we talk about individual countries, although Indian history, if we go through Indian history, the individual contributions are not usually counted in Indian history. Indian history is about collectiveness. Our society is about collectiveness. We don't talk about individuals. See, this is the difference between Western and Indian society. The Western society talks about individual, me, myself. And the Indians talk about the collectiveness. They talk about, so we are a composite, a unity. Like in village, everybody lives like a family, right? Our philosophy is Vasudev Kutumbakam. We say the whole world is a single village. So this is our philosophy, the collectiveness. But yet, there are some individuals who have contributed to the idea of India. One of them, the foremost, is the Buddha. Then comes the Mahavira. There are maybe hundreds of people, there are hundreds of unknown people who have contributed to the idea. It's difficult to compress down it in a single talk of half an hour or 1 hour. So I will talk about some core components of idea of India. And here at public sectors, we are there to promote, protect, and propagate those ideas of India for which this nation was set up as a state in 1947, and we were set up by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in early 1950s. We are there to propagate the idea of India. So the first and foremost idea of India is the spirit of assimilation despite diversity. So this is a complex thing to speak, but not complex to understand. See, if you see the history of India, most of the people are here living in India are the foreign people. If you go through the history of India, the Central Asian people came way back in 2000 years ago. The Greeks came and they established here. They permanently resided here. The Turkish came, and this Arabic people came. So lots of people, Persia was having a lot of influence in India. So Persian people came and they set up, and they all contributed. But India did not become Persia when the Persian people came to India. India remained India. India was a distinct civilization since 5,000 years, and it has remained a distinct civilization. In fact, it is the only civilization in the world which has been able to maintain its distinctiveness. All the great civilization of the world has collapsed, whether it's Mesopotamia or the Arabic or the Greece. Even Greece have collapsed. There is no civilization in the world which has agility and survivability like Indian civilization. So there are some factors which have contributed our civilization in its survival. And the first factor is the spirit of assimilation despite diversity. So what's the spirit? The spirit is we can assimilate different faith, different belief people in our, whether the Muslims came or the Christians came, they have been assimilated in our civilization. They have become Indian. They have not become theirs. They have become Indian. Whether you talk about Muslims of this country, if you talk about, so the kind of Islam which is being practiced in India is far different as compared to the Arab. Indian Islam is moderate Islam. It's Indian Islam. It's not Arabic Islam. So this is the Indian statedness, and this is the spirit which comes. This is inherent in our civilization. This is a development of, I would say, 5,000 years, which we have been able to retain and maintain such an assimilative spirit in countries. So this is the first idea I will talk about, and from this idea comes the spirit of secularism. This is very important, and this is something which makes India a separate thinking. Is a separate idea, the idea of secularism. Although there was onslaught on this idea of secularism in our on our country in early 1930s, when Jinnah was so arrogant and so self-indulgent that he wanted to create a separate country on the basis of religion, but he has failed. The partition of Pakistan on the basis of religion has failed. It is a failed state, and ultimately it got divided into the two parts, the Bangladesh. And Bangladesh division did not happen on the basis of religion, it happened on the basis of language. So the thinking of two nation theory, the two religion theory has completely, obviously it has failed, and the idea of India has survived even after 75 years of independence. We are here at public sector, and different kind of people from across the country, whether they are different, having different religions, different castes, different races, and they are all there sitting, and we are today celebrating the idea of India. This is a National Unity Day, so I am trying to link it from the perspective of national unity, and obviously I would come to the vigilance angle later on. So I have talked about the idea of India. The idea of India is the spirit of assimilation despite diversity. There are some many other components also. If we talk, the one such component is the spirit of universal and local. India, if we see, there are inherent contradictions in our life. If we see, there are inherent contradictions. Like when we go for the adoption of something universal, so the local elements will come. No, the thing should be local. It should be indigenous. How you can go to universal? It should be local. So these are inherent contradictions, like modernity and traditionalism. So the old people say, see, the old time was golden time. What you are talking, what you are doing in these days, you are wasting your time and energy. You are non people. We have seen the old people. They were good. They were golden people. So this is the inherent contradiction in our life, in our society. People are talking about universal versus local, modern versus tradition, short term versus long term. This is also a contradiction. You want production, so let's do it in a short term. But in the long term, you are going to create the vertical benches, and whoever is coming at the later time, he has to toil hard. So these are the contradictions. But anyhow, the idea of India synchronizes it. It actually harmonizes, it balances the opposite, the contradictions, and it creates a harmony. And the best document which represents the idea of India, do you know which is the best living document which represents the idea of India? It is the Constitution of India. It is the living document. It's not a dead document, because it is subject to change. It is subject to deliberation. It's a subject of everyday talk and discussion. And the Constitution of India embodies the idea of India. I would read the preamble of our Indian Constitution: "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic." So this is the idea of India: democracy, the sovereignty, the secularism, the integrity, and if you go to the preamble at the downside, you will see the three terms: unity, integrity. So that is also there, the integrity. So I would cut short. Actually, this is a topic which can be extended to whole day, because there are courses and there are books, lots of books written on this topic. So I would not delve deep into the concept of idea of India, but the short and precise thing is, we here at public sector are there to protect, propagate the idea of India, and we should know the idea of India. Then only we can assume, we can think about our role. See, the corruption, the business, these are some repercussions of a problem which is at broader level. The broader level, what is the problem at broader level? We are not able to visualize why we are here in this public sector. We could have chosen the private sector. Private sector is there solely for the profit motive, but we are not here solely for the profit motive. Our existence is there in Ties with Destiny, and the Ties with Destiny speaks about dedication to the service of India. And when you are working for India, the service of India, then from where the problem of corruption arises? Why there is corruption in the public sector? Why we are not able to think on these lines on which our founding fathers thought? In early 1940s, there was a whole lot of idealism from Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi. If you go through the annals of Indian history, you would see that everybody was talking about, we will make such an India. We will make a different India. Although I am not saying that we have completely failed in making a different India. Obviously, if we see the development over the past 75 years, we have made remarkable progress. If we see our background, see, America is a country which got independence in 1776, so it's almost 250-year-old democracy. But India is a new democracy. It's a newborn state. Just 75 years have happened, and if we just few development indicators I would cite here. I am speaking in English. Is there any problem in doing that, or is it okay for everyone? Okay. Okay. So if we talk about some few factors like life expectancy, let's say life expectancy. So in 1947, what was our life expectancy? Just 32 years. At average, an individual was living just for only 32 years in this country in 1947. Now our life expectancy is well beyond 60. It's 65 or some, I think 67. So don't you think this is development? Obviously this is development. This is a big achievement. Our literacy was just 10% in 1947. Now we are 70% literate. There were only 7 engineering colleges in country, 7 medical colleges, pardon. 7 medical colleges, now we have a lot of medical colleges. Our education system has improved. Now everybody is having education. They have the opportunity to go for education. Our employment has increased. Our agricultural situation has improved a lot. If we think about the international standing of India, so what was it in 1947? We were nowhere as far as international standing was concerned. Now we are among the fastest emerging superpower. Although we have lagged behind China, but after China, the name of India comes. So if we talk about the top 5 nations, military-wise, economy-wise in the world, India stands there. So this is our achievement of the 75 years, and this achievement also its basis, its origin in Ties with Destiny of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He set up the objective way back in midnight of 1947, 15th of August 1947. And then he takes the steps, he creates all these things from 1947 to 1960. A public sector expansion happened on a very large basis in the country. And it became a sole sector of Indian economy. Private sector was there, but it was not having that much existence in it. Ajay, how long I can continue?
Yeah, you have time.
I have time. Till?
You have 1 hour.
Till 1?
Yeah, you have at least 1 hour.
Okay, so after talking about public sector, okay. So public sector expansion happened at a very rapid pace in the initial 10 years, and the technical education also got expensive. Indian Institute of Technology Kharagpur was set up in 1950. Then the Bombay, Delhi, and this Kanpur came, and later on Delhi was this Roorkee, and India came very later, Guwahati and Roorkee. But these institutions contributed to the development of country. You can't imagine, but they have been driving force. They have been driving factor behind the India's initial industrialization and its industrial growth. And by 1960, we were having a very robust industrial base in the country. But still there was the problem of agriculture, and then the Green Revolution happened. So these were early years for post-independent India, in which, see, you are a newly independent nation and you have a lot of challenges. The first and foremost challenge is how to protect your own independence. Because see, if you see the global power politics, so global power politics is only about the states are at having a competing interest, and they are at constant war with each other. Whether it's ideological war, political war, economic war, technological war, or sometimes a real one-to-one war. So the first and foremost challenge before the country was to protect its independence. And in the protection of its independence comes the concept of the non-alignment movement. The non-alignment movement had genesis in we may talk about the morality. See, we are not with USSR, we are not with the USA, we are neutral. But if we go into the deep, we will see it's come out of strategic necessity. And the strategic necessity is, if we want to protect our independence, we have to adopt an independent and neutral third path. And so this is how were the early India post-independence, the public sector and our foreign policy, economic policy. Now the public sector was created on a very large scale, and there was virtually non-existent private sector. There was no competition also in the country. And it's so the new problems created in the country. The new problems were license inspector Raj. The public sector was monopoly. It was licensing everything. It was creating some kind of suffocating environment for the free activity, the free economy, free trade, these things. And a problem of corruption also happened at a very massive scale. Although if you see, problem of corruption is not something new. It is not something which has happened only in post-independent India. It was existent before independent India also. And the earliest reference to the corruption comes from Kautilya's Arthashastra. Kautilya was a master thinker in statecraft, and he has written Arthashastra. And in Arthashastra, what he writes, he says, human mind is a fickle mind. Fickle mind means you just stand floating. So one day you are on this side, other day on other side, and someday on other side. So what he thought, what his philosophy was, you cannot prevent corruption. Whenever a public servant is there in public service, so one day he will be ethical, but another day whenever he will get the opportunity, he will do the corruption. This is what it is written in Arthashastra. I don't think it is so, and modern thinking is also not so, that you cannot prevent corruption. Obviously corruption can be prevented, but this is how the 2000 years ago he was talking that corruption cannot be prevented because human mind is a fickle mind. You teach him integrity today, tomorrow he will forget it and he will do it. So what is the solution which has been suggested by the Kautilya? Kautilya says, make some extensive arrangement of spies and spy on your own people, and whomsoever is caught, punish him hardly. That is the solution of corruption. Some other remedy, he has detailed 40 kinds of corruption, all to the different kinds of corruption. Sir has told 4, but Kautilya says 40. So 40 kinds of corruption, and all those corruptions, but that is the simple analysis of his, that it cannot be prevented, and you don't have any payout except spy it, punish it, and pay your officer higher salary, but don't keep extra people with you. If you are requiring 2 people for a job and you are keeping 4, one thing is you are wasting your exchequer's money in employing extra people. Another thing is you are already you are creating more opportunity for corruption, because more the people, more the corruption. So this is how it is, but I don't agree with it, and modern philosophy also don't agree with it. If we delve into the philosophy of corruption, I am delving into the philosophy of corruption. So philosophy wise, we have Indian branch of philosophy, the Western philosophy. First I will delve into the Western philosophy. Indian philosophy is also very extensive. Indian philosophy is more tilted toward morality. So if we see corruption from the angle of morality, see why I am going to discuss all this. You see, the problem of corruption is real in our country. Former Prime Minister of India, Shri Rajiv Gandhi, used to say, when I release 1 rupee from the center, only 15 paisa reaches to the poor. So the 85 paisa gets siphoned out in the process. So the problem of corruption is real, and it is very much deeply ingrained in our every society, institutions. It is very deeply penetrated. And you have created all kind of institutions. From 1954, you created Central Vigilance Commission on the recommendation of Santhanam Committee. Before going that, I would talk about one outstanding leader of Tamil Nadu, K. Kamaraj. I hope some of you may have heard of him, K. Kamaraj. So the K. Kamaraj was only a 10th class pass person, but he was having an intellect which was very broad, very vast. So initial years, India got independent. There was a lot of idealism, but gradually the idealism ended and the practicality came. People wanted minister posts, people wanted civil services posts, and they are there to earn something. So ministers also want to earn, the politicians and the bureaucrats also want to earn. K. Kamaraj come with a plan, which is called Kamaraj plan. And what he said, let us do one thing. Whomsoever is occupying the minister post, he will renunciate it. He will leave it for the development of country, and let's do the post of minister to somebody who you think that he should be given, and I will not do it. So initially the people did it. Some people did it, not everybody. Some people, obviously, whatever you say to them, they are not there to defend you. They are there to learn something, and they will not budge from their position. But somebody did it, and from the Kamaraj plan, it happened. But the problem of corruption was increasing in the government of India at a phenomenal rate since 1960. It was very difficult to control it, so government set up the Santhanam Committee. In early 1960, the Santhanam Committee. And on the recommendation of Santhanam Committee, the Central Vigilance Commission was set up in 1964 by the executive order of Government of India. It got its statutory status only in 2003 when CVC Act was passed. If we see the CBI is altogether a different institution. Although it's linked with the CVC, but it is different organization. It draws its power from 1946 Delhi Police Establishment Act. So its jurisdiction is different. It means its authority comes from the different source. And CVC, sir has already talked about it in detail, so I will not go into that. But the point is, you have CVC, you have CBI, you have POTA, you have NOTA, you have TADA, you have everything for organized crime, for money laundering. So many Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. Recently they have amended it and they have included many things in it. But corruption we have not been able to eradicate the corruption from the country. In fact, we are one of the most corrupt country in the world. If we see the ratings of the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, if you just Google it out and go and see it, India is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. They rate 90 countries, and our rank is 78 to 80, always. So it comes in that range. Only 10 countries are more corrupt than us. And what are those countries? Those countries will be Sudan or Somalia. So those countries are below us. And then even Bangladesh and Sri Lanka is also above us in corruption. Why we have failed? As a nation, this is a failure that we have not been able to protect and prevent corruption. Despite organizing everything, we are doing central vigilance awareness, we are doing this, preaching, talking, telling everybody, but the results are not there. There is something else which needs to be done. Knowing about corruption, knowing about procedure, and protecting yourself from the vigilance department is something different. You may be doing something which is short term. For long term, you are there to realize that price of destiny, and the price of destiny, you are there to protect and propagate the idea of India. And the idea of India, for idea of India, for idea of India, the corruption has to be eradicated, because see, corruption has been one of the factors. If you learn down the page in history, corruption is one such a big factor which has led to national collapse. If you see that the history of Rome was the leading civilization, leading state. Way back in 4th century BC, and it continued for from around 800 years. But it collapsed in 480. Why? It became so corrupt that there was there were no statecraft. Everything was being sold for money, and the corruption got penetrated, and somebody attacked it, and their country collapsed. Corruption is such a big menace to society, to individual, to nation. It has to be eradicated. So our vision, what I would argue here, my argument is, our vision should not be to somehow get protected ourselves from the business department and organize the business awareness week so that we will get protected by observing some formality. That is okay. I would say that is also required. But the vision should be broad. Why we are here, and what is our objective, and what we are doing for this country. So this is how I take the problem of corruption, and I will not go into those intricacies, the details related to business and business. I will talk about something else. If you go through this year's business awareness week theme, which is I think there on every banner, what is the theme of this year's business awareness week? The theme is, the Federal Business Commission has chosen self-reliance with integrity. In fact, if you see business awareness week or any business kind of activity, they keep talking about one thing, which is integrity. I would emphasize what is this integrity, and how what is this value which has been emphasized over the years again and again, and what is this integrity? In fact, Central Vigilance Commission has also realized it, so that is why they are keeping self-reliance with integrity. So integrity is a moral value. It's a moral value. What is moral value? Moral values are your beliefs. Their origin may be anything, like your individual beliefs, maybe societal beliefs, religious beliefs, national beliefs, but it is related to your belief. And integrity is the conception. Its opposite is hypocrisy. Integrity's opposite is hypocrisy. I hope you understand what is hypocrisy. So integrity is what you think, what you believe, and what you speak. They all should be in harmony. This is integrity. And this is the ultimate value. Below it comes honesty, below it comes selfishness, below it comes everything, below it comes. It is the ultimate value. If you are able to do it, then you are not required to be taught moral values, because you know everything. So what you think, what you believe, what you speak, they are in harmony. It should not be like that you are speaking something today, you are doing something tomorrow, something else, and according to your self agenda, you just your moral values changes and your decision changes. This should not be like this. So this is how the integrity, the value system. I am just trying to give you a flavor, the crux of the idea. So this is integrity. Now, from where the concept comes, the concept of integrity. The oldest, I would feel, it comes from the Socrates. If you have heard about the Socrates, the 6th century BC Greek thinker, Socrates. And Socrates, we don't know anything about Socrates from his own writings. We know him from the writings of Plato, who was his disciple. And Plato's disciple was Aristotle, and Aristotle's disciple was Alexander the Great. So this is the chain. So from Socrates' philosophy, the Socrates thing comes the concept of integrity. What he said, actually, if you go through again I am coming to the history of world history and history of humans, 6th century BC was a major turning point in world history. 6th century BC. It was a century of revolution. It was a century of thought, thinking. There were a lot of philosophers which took birth in 6th century BC. Socrates, Buddha, Mahavira, Confucius, Tao. Tao is very major figure in Chinese philosophy. Confucius is also a major figure in Chinese philosophy. So all these philosophers took birth in 6th century BC, and at 6th century BC, at that time there is Socrates, and what he's saying, he says, practice what you preach. Practice what you preach. He talks about importance of knowledge. Knowledge is important. You should know the moral values, and without knowing the moral values, you cannot practice. So again, that is very important thing. From where your moral values are coming. See, if I am thief and I say theft is good, that is my value. So if I have integrity, I will every time do the theft. So I may be a person of high integrity, but my moral values are not good. Theft is not a good thing. So that is also good, but I would still say that such persons are better than hypocrites who change their moral values every day. Even a thief of high integrity is better than a hypocrite who change his a viewpoint and thinking on every moment according to the situation. So he talks about, and then he says one should live in a moderate life, a life which is of moderation, something which is not in one extreme. It should be moderate living, and one should work toward the spiritual development of self. So that is a very important thing. Spiritual side, he was working on the spiritual side, but ultimately what he was saying, he was seen as so radical at that time that the king, the then Roman king, asked him that please change your stand. Go and publicly say what I am preaching, what I am saying is wrong. And if you don't do, I will punish you. He says, see, I am a person of high integrity. What I am saying is correct. And what I think, I speak, I believe, that is all my in harmony. And I will not budge. Whatever you do, I don't care. So ultimately he is hanged for his high integrity. And the Roman emperor hanged him. But he did not left his integrity. So this is a moral value which is a lesson to us here in public sector. Although even though your boss is corrupt, but if I am a person of high integrity, I am not going to listen him. I am not doing his job. I am doing the job of public sector. I am there to uphold the tribes with destiny. I am there to uphold the Constitution of India, not the whim and fancies of my boss. This is how the integrity comes into the concept. Then comes the Plato. Actually, time is a little short, so I will not delve into all those philosophy. But Plato is also talking something which is about virtues. And virtue, he also may feel, this is the difference between Kautilya and the Plato and Socrates. Kautilya said, virtues cannot be taught. Whatsoever you do, today you will do, tomorrow he will forget, and he will do his own work. So you require spies, you require enforcement, you require rule, law, regulation, everything. But Plato is saying, Socrates is saying, no, you can teach him, you can make him a moral person. So this is a very important thing. If you can make an individual, a moral one, if you can teach him a bigger idea, then he would not require all these laws and regulations, the vigilance and everything. That is quite possible. So Aristotle is also there, but see, the time is short, and I would not go into the Aristotle and all those philosophers. But one important philosopher I would discuss, that is very important. Yes.
Sir, if we know both the ways, Kaupilya's way, hard way, and moral ways, still why we are in the corruptist India? If we know the solution, still we are failing them. There must be some new solution.
Okay. So
there has to be some solution different than what was earlier prescribed.
I would say what I think, in fact, what Mahatma Gandhi also thought. If you see the idea of India, what Mahatma Gandhi thought, Mahatma Gandhi believed in enlightened anarchy. Enlightened anarchy. What is enlightened anarchy? Enlightened anarchy is a system in which you do not require any inspector. People are moral by themselves. There are examples I'm not saying something which is very ideal, which is very abstract. You are saying, no, this will not happen. You are talking something otherworldly things. No, there are countries where politicians, where bureaucrats, their people are having very high integrity. Can you name these countries? They can be an example for you. Some countries are Scandinavian countries. Norway, Sweden, Finland, Ireland. They always top on the list of this corrupt transparency index or world happiness index. Their society is designed on such rule. People are guided by a vision, a thinking. They are not. They are.
So we also know all the visions. We know moral values.
But
In India, we people of India, but still we are failing. I think there is some big reason to that, and that had not been addressed.
If you are talking about some racial region or geographical region.
No, I don't mean that has not been addressed. There has to be some different reasons.
Obviously, that has to be addressed. See,
but we don't know that reasons. Maybe we are
no,
just
if
approaching by moral values or some Kautilya's way. Both ways we are failing.
What I would suggest here, as you have asked, we are a country, although we are a country of 70% literate people, but we still have a big illiteracy. Big illiteracy. Socrates said that we teach the people the morality. Teach. At least teach. Then you can say, okay, what I taught him and he is not following it. So, the moral literacy is a big factor. It's a big factor. Because you have not been able to tell them the idea of India. If you don't tell them the idea of India, your education system is so collapsed that people have read for 10, 12, 15 years and they don't know why this country was set up, what happened, they just read and forget it. This is how the state of affairs. But anyhow, someday, actually we all work on hope, and someday a day will come. Actually, that is also, see, that India is a new country, India is a new state, it's just 75-year-old. Right? I mean, it's not like America, it's a 250-year-old. Okay, so development stage, there is a stage of development, and when that completes, then you get promoted to the next stage. So these are stages, and it's very difficult to leapfrog one state to another.
Maybe we need big changes in our education system.
Obviously, that is already
as you said that there are no big teachings on morality in our
obviously,
education
that
system.
is happening on a big way. Actually,
we are based on concentrated on earning money
right,
in future.
Right, that is true, but that is also happening on a big way in this country. Since last century, and if you want to know some contributors of this phenomena, one name comes to my mind immediately is Swami Vivekananda. What a contribution he's made to this country. Means that is unparalleled contribution in the morality and ethics. So there are individuals. Actually, India is blessed, I would say, in this sense that we have such a great teacher, such a great leader who have taught us. It is unparalleled because see, Western country, European country, they don't have such kind of spiritual leanings which India have. So
but
I think
they are not as corrupt as we are. In corruptionist we are.
See, corruption. If you see, the corruption is there due to poverty also. Poverty is one of the biggest reason for the corruption in this country. So you have to see all the things are linked here. You can't say that corruption is happening in isolation. It is linked. It is linked with women empowerment as well. Right? So all things are linked. These are socio-economic things which are very intricate, which are very complex, and they are linked and they work in tandem. So that is how. Anyway, now I would just directly jump to one important philosopher, that is Immanuel Kant, and he is the leading philosopher of the modern times. Immanuel Kant, he was a German philosopher, and what I thought I should give you an idea of how to constitute your own moral values. I say, see, you may think, okay, this religion is teaching me something, so these are my moral values. So this is a big confusion from where moral values should come. Whether they should come from the religion, whether they should come from the society or organization or institution, from where. You may say Gita is a good source of moral value. Okay, let's adopt it. Gita is a good source. It is being taught since a long time. So it is a good source of moral value. But it's a complex document. You can't read it, and if you can't understand, its understanding will require you years. So a shortcut I am giving here, and that comes from the Immanuel Kant. So what is his concept? He is a leading philosopher. If you just Google it, he will come to know he is the means he is considered only next to Aristotle in philosophy, Immanuel Kant. So he says, what he speaks, his concept of philosophy comes from the concept of categorical imperative. Categorical imperative. What is categorical imperative? Categorical imperative is, see, when you decide a moral principle, you say, okay, this is a moral principle. Okay, let's accept. Okay, let's say theft is a moral principle. It's a good principle. Let's assume it. Now apply it. Do you want theft to be a moral principle across the country, across the nation, across the world? If you agree, then it will be a moral principle. Okay, I would say, okay, I will do the theft, but if somebody else do the theft at my home, what will happen? You will think. Oh, you will say, no, it should not happen. It cannot be universal principle. It can be good for myself, okay, I will take this tab and go away. But if someone else take my tab and go away because it is a moral principle, he is doing it, you would not like it. So it cannot be a moral. So one thing which can be universally applied will become a moral principle. And this is up to you, whether you can, whenever a doubt, whenever a debate happens, a discussion happens, so moral principles would be only those principles which can be universal in all perspectives, right? So that is important thing, and that has been a guiding force for all modern morality. There may be ethical dilemmas all time. This is very easy to speak in a plain language that this is moral, this is not moral, but there are always ethical dilemmas, and ethical dilemmas require a judicious, a conscious solution, right? One of the solution is Gandhiji's talisman. If you have read the NCERT books, there is always on the back side Gandhiji's talisman. So he said, whenever I had a doubt and when my self was overbearing me, and then I went to conceptualize the old left and the weakest person which I can thought of, and what I am going to decide whether it will be of some help to that person or not. If I can figure out that, okay, that will help to that person, I will take that decision. So that is Gandhiji's talisman to deal with ethical dilemmas. Anyway, so I have delved deep into this conception of morality because Sir has already finished this all legality and angle, so I have gone through the ethical angle. And as a public sector, now I would return to this, the topic number 7, which is called return to freedom and living life. So I am just trying to come back from where I started. I would request you to kindly turn that page. Yes, okay. So public sector has a key role, in fact today also. It was having a leading role way back in 1950s, now also it has a key role. And now it has a role in self-reliance, like here in Coal India, we are national coal miner. We are contributing about 60,000 crore annually to national exchequer, which is a very big amount. Do you know the monthly GST collection? It's hardly 110,000 crore. So almost half of month of your GST collection you are contributing. It's a very, very big amount. We are a big contributor to the national progress. In fact, eastern states like Jharkhand and Odisha, their whole economy is wholly dependent on coal. So, country, as far as our company is concerned, we are having a key role to play. And for that key role to play, we need an organization such as our manpower, our institution, which is efficient, which is disciplined, which is corruption free. And it is our responsibility as executive or non-executive of this country to make it a big organization, a great organization, an organization which can be reckoned with, which can be which sets an example before other organizations and the country as well. So this is how I come back to Drive with Destiny. And the second last point I would say, I would request you to read. The ambition of greatest man of our generation has been to buy every tear from every eye. That may be beyond us, but so long as there are tears and suffering, so long our work will not over. This is our aim, this is our objective in this country. Whenever we are doing national service, we are working for country, we are working for India. And unless there are a tear in any eye, our work will not stop. The greatest man, the reference to greatest man in this para is to Mahatma Gandhi. He was referring to Mahatma Gandhi because this is quote of Mahatma Gandhi: "Wipe every tear from every eye." So this is how I would conclude, and I would request you to turn the page to the references. These are some references which I have referred to: The Freedom at Midnight by Larry Collins and Dominic Lepere, Discovery of India is an outstanding book of Jawaharlal Nehru. I would urge you to read, go through them. Idea of India from Sunil Pillani, and the makers of modern India, Ramchandra Guha. This is an outstanding book by Ramchandra Guha. He's elaborately detailed on contribution of founding fathers of India. Okay, so now I would request some discussion. If there are any doubts or discussion can happen, so I am ready to take it. Okay, yeah, please.
As you can see, I'll take down the names of the most transparent and the most integrated, what we can say, most honest nation of the world.
Please.
This is the current list. And I'll take the names from the first one to the last one. So the first one is Denmark, second one is Canada, third is Germany, then comes Netherlands, New Zealand, followed by Australia, Sweden, Norway.
Right.
None of this country had that people like Aristotle, Plato, even Mahatma Gandhi, even Nelson Mandela, any kind of. But I think so. We were not having such a great idealistic person who were usually peak thinkers of the society.
Right.
But I think so. They used that phenomena and they followed it. So, with my point of view, I think this corruption thing, the integrity thing, the moral thing, it is also a group thing.
Right.
One person cannot make you win the game.
It's true.
It's a part of a thing I am discussing. It may not be true, may not be completely 100% true. But as you can see, the name suggests these are not ancient civilization. These are not means there are vast countries. Most of them are cosmopolitan, just like us. They don't have such more religious and ancient values like us. Then to Greece, like of thing, and then to they are successful.
Yes, see.
What is your point of view on that? Because they don't have this kind of legit thinkers.
As I said earlier also, see, we are just a 75-year-old state. We are still a young democracy. Although those countries are also young democracy, but they have not seen what we have seen.
I was discussing that maybe we are not getting at the root cause. We are just like sometimes we go to a wrong treatment. We are having something else and you have a different phenomenon.
Maybe we are
two diseases are there and they are mostly having the common symptoms, and we go, doctor opted for the wrong treatment or treatment for the wrong truth. So it might be happening because we are so deliberate, we are investing such a huge amount of things because not to get the society spoiled, not to get more corrupted and all. But we are not making so much progress, but the behind nation, we can see this thing.
Sir, I think one reason may be, just my observation, that we are very much into idealism. We decorate a single person very much, that he is so much, he is that. Instead of focusing on ideas, like Japan did. Japan was a disaster, bomb blast and all. But they also started from where we started, and they are different, we are different.
See,
so maybe we are very much into idealism.
It's
We
not a
idealize a
one-man
person.
job.
And
It's not a one-man
very major
job. It's not a
contribution to
one-man
our
job.
Bollywood also. And Bollywood and our education system, we don't talk about ideas. We talk about person. What he did, what he did not do, how we can follow him. We are creating followers, not leaders. I think so. That's not
yes, true. Actually, what you said and what you also said. That's true, actually. And in fact, if I can think of at this time, with reference to you, we speaks about individuals rather than ideas. So what comes to my mind is the three bondings of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in Constitution Assembly way back in 1950. And he bond India. That okay, now we have got the freedom, now we've got the independence. But don't do the hero worship. Cult in religion is good. It may lead you to salvation. But cult in politics or public life will lead you to nowhere.
But that is what is happening. What is taught, what is said is okay. But in education system, wherever we see only peoples, heroes, not ideas.
Actually, that is also
But
required.
when I recall what I have learned till my 10th, all I recall is these peoples.
You need examples, you need role models. A nation in search of its identity always seek individuals who can become role models.
Beyond that,
But
we
there is
lose
a
the
different
ideas
system.
inside of
There is a
ideas.
different system. What you are saying is there is a idealistic person means as a leader and there are followers. This is one system. One there is a leader and there is a bunch of people, they will follow that thing.
Right.
Second thing is means a opportunistic person. He doesn't have a leader, he doesn't follow a leader, he is not a follower. Whenever he gets a chance, he gets a means, that is a thinking of a corrupt person. But that could be the same phenomena for a very true person. So if that person is encashing that method that I could be opportunistic, or what we say in today's term is gold digger. Gold digger. We can't cut down that system. We can by not talking about it and just praising the highs and lows. These are the leaders. These were the good peoples, and these gave us the brilliant ideas. It is true, but that wheel is not rotating. The followers and the leaders think it is not rotating. What is rotating actually is the opportunistic person. He is cashing every movement. He is cashing on every movement. He is attending every classes, and he will say, "Okay, let the wheel go." The wheel wouldn't go. He knows the thing, and in the gap, when he finds a gap in the system, he banks on this thing. He is opportunistic. So how to kill that? Kill that. We should also treat. There should be a 2-point: integrity, moral values, and how to kill that person who is opportunistic.
Actually, what I can deduct from your viewpoint, you are talking about political. The person who is opportunist and he is getting all the treats, and he himself is projecting as role model. I think what you are saying.
On the small skills also, if you are distributing even the sweets to a person, you will always find a person who, as soon as a flick of a second, somebody is not watching, he will grab 2 laddus. Is that not he is opportunistic in that? That is also a bribe, that is also a theft. What we do is we overlook that thing.
Actually, see, that tolerance to corruption is also not good for the country. If you are tolerating corruption, that is also you are harming your country and organization. That is true. If you are tolerating corruption, that is true. That you are harming. If you are choosing such leaders who are corrupt, or if you are choosing people, if you are promoting such people who are corrupt. But what I think the larger picture is, this country is there to progress from what it is here. It will certainly go to heights which Buddha, Mahavira, or even Swami Vivekananda thought of about this country. And we all, as a 21st century people, we have the opportunity. It's all in our hand. How we think and what we want India of 21st century. Next year we are going to celebrate the 75th independence anniversary, and from then on the government has set out the ambitious agenda of Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav. If this whole agenda, this whole thing, the vision behind is to self-rejuvenate, to think what this country is and where do we want in coming decade or 2 decades, where we are looking for, but whether we want to become a developed country by 2035. This is how we should work here at Coal India also. See, coal will end, but Coal India will not end. It will become an energy company. So that should be your vision, that should be our vision as a leader, as a generational leader of this organization. And that's all. If there is any other question, so I'm ready to take. Okay, so I think there are no questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Priyank sir, for such a wonderful and insightful lecture. मैं आके प्रसाद सर से रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा हमारा आज का एक छोटा सा लेक्चर लेके और हमारा मार्गदर्शन करेंगे.
बहुत ही सारगर्भित भाषा में और बड़ा ही एलेबोरेटिव ढंग से श्री प्रियांक मिश्रा इंटीग्रिटी के बारे में, मोरल वैल्यू के बारे में, इस विजिलेंस अवेयरनेस वीक जो चल रहा है उसके बारे में बताया. उनका बहुत ही भास्ट डेलिब्रेशन रहा. एक दो बात मैं बताऊंगा यहाँ पर, बहुत नट शेयर में ज़्यादा समय नहीं लूँगा. पानीग्राही सर भी बहुत अच्छा बोले. हमारा देश इतना पुराना है और हमारा जो धर्म भी है जुड़ा हुआ इसमें हर जगह मोरल वैल्यूज की ही बात है और अच्छी बातें, वसुधैव कुटुंबकम, एथिक्स. लेकिन इसके बावजूद भी भारत देश का जो वर्तमान परिप्रेक्ष्य है, करप्शन में, रैंकिंग में जब तक 80 के आसपास हम लोग हैं. इतना पुराना देश, हमारी इतनी पुरानी सभ्यता, इतनी पुरानी संस्कृति, तो कहीं ना कहीं कुछ ना कुछ कमी है. तभी हम लोग इतना रैंकिंग में पीछे हैं. मैं एक छोटी सी कहानी बताऊंगा. हमारे जब मैट्रिक में जब मैं पढ़ता था तो हमारे पंडित जी थे, संस्कृत पढ़ाते थे मास्टर जी. उनका लड़का उस समय जापान में नौकरी करता था. तो ये कुछ दिनों के लिए अपने लड़के के पास जापान गए, वहाँ रहे. जब लौटने लगे तो उस समय टेप रिकॉर्डर का बड़ा क्रेज था. मार्केट गए और एक टेप रिकॉर्डर खरीदे जापान में. एक दुकान से खरीद करके ले आए और अपने लड़के बेटा जहाँ रहता था घर में आ गए. घर में जब टेप रिकॉर्डर को बजा करके देखने लगे तो ठीक गलत तरीके से वो बजा नहीं, कुछ उसमें मैन्युफैक्चरिंग डिफेक्ट था. तो हमारे मास्टर साहब को 2-3 दिन बाद लौटना था, जापान से इंडिया आना था. तो सोचे कि तो खराब निकल गया है, मैं जाता हूँ इसको दुकान में बदल देता हूँ, जो हम लोग का इंडियन मेंटेलिटी है. दूसरे दिन वो गए मार्केट में टेप रिकॉर्डर को लेकर के और सोचे कि बदल दें. वहाँ गए तो संयोग से दुकान बंद थी. बगल वाला ही एक इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स गुड्स की दुकान थी. वो हमको अपना संस्करण बताए थे उस समय जब मैं मैट्रिक में पढ़ता था तब. तो बगल का दुकान भी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स का ही दुकान था. तो वो पूछा, वो समझ गया कि इंडियन है, जापानीज तो आया नहीं. तो पूछा कि क्या बात है, कहाँ है. तो ये बताए कि हम यहाँ से खरीदे थे और गड़बड़ निकल गया है, तो आपकी दुकान बंद है, ये कब खुलेगी दुकान. तो कोई बात नहीं, आप बैठिए. और वो टेप रिकॉर्डर वो दुकानदार, बगल वाला जो दुकानदार था, वो रख लिया और उनको उसी मॉडल का दूसरा टेप रिकॉर्डर सेम उनको हाथ में दे दिया कि ले जाइए आप इसको. तो हमारे मास्टर साहब बड़े सरप्राइज हुए. बोले मैं तो आपकी दुकान से खरीदा नहीं था और खराब वाला आप ले लिया और मुझे अच्छा वाला दे रहे हैं. तो ये तो मुझे समझ में नहीं आ रहा, ऐसा आप क्यों कर रहे हैं. तो बड़ी दूर की बात वो जापानी बोला ये कि आप इस टेप रिकॉर्डर को लेकर के जो खराब वाला, जब आप इंडिया जाइएगा तो आपके जो अड़ोस पड़ोस में आपके जो रिलेटिव्स हैं उनको यहीं भी बोलिएगा कि जापानी माल बड़ा खराब होता है. देखो मैं वहाँ से लाया लेकिन खराब है. और इस तरह से मेरे देश का नाम, जो जापान का नाम है, पूरे इंडिया में खराब के रूप में प्रचारित होगा. तो मैं ये नहीं चाहता हूँ कि मेरे देश का नाम दूसरे देश में खराब हो. तो जहाँ पर इस तरह का मोरल वैल्यू हो वहाँ की जनता में, तभी करप्शन जा सकता है. रही बात यह कि हम लोग सभी लोग यहाँ पर पढ़े लिखे शिक्षित व्यक्ति हैं, हमारे बाल बच्चे भी हैं. कोई भी पिता नहीं चाहता है कि उसका बेटा करप्ट हो. हम चाहते हैं कि मेरा बेटा चोरी करे, बेईमानी करे, नौकरी पे जाए तो घूस ले, फिर गलत हो तो पकड़ा जाए, कोई नहीं चाहता है, लेकिन उसके बावजूद भी ये समाज में इतना विद्यमान है एक अर्थ से। तो कहीं ना कहीं मुझे अपना आत्मावलोकन करना पड़ेगा और सोचना पड़ेगा, और जब तक देश को हम सामने नहीं रखेंगे तब तक ये मोरल एथिक्स नहीं इम्प्लीमेंट होगा। और बहुत डाइवर्सिटी, अभी देखिए हम एक सिंपल बर्निंग एग्जाम्पल बता रहा हूँ। सबको पता है कि आर्यन पकड़ा गया, लेकिन उसको बचाने के लिए बड़े बड़े वकील भी यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं, उसके प्ली देने के लिए उसके बिहाफ में। वो वकील भी जानता है कि जरूर पकड़ा गया, इनसे अगर 28 दिन तक 27 दिन तक उसको बेल नहीं मिला तो कहीं ना कहीं एनसीबी के पास कोई पुख्ता सबूत है। लेकिन उसको भी बचाने के लिए, वो गलत आदमी को बचाने के लिए भी, उसके फेवर में दलील देने के लिए हमारे यहाँ सिस्टम मौजूद है। जो चाहे आप हाई पे करके उस वकील को आप हायर करिए, चाहे जिस तरीके से करिए, लेकिन उसको और बच भी जाएगा। आने वाले दिनों में इसके पहले भी बहुत हुआ। आपको रणबीर कपूर का नाम, रणबीर सिंह का नाम आया, दीपिका पादुकोण, सुशांत सिंह कहानी आई थी, उस समय भी ड्रग्स की बातें आई थी, गांजा की बात आई थी। तो ये सब होता है यहाँ पर। कौटिल्या की बात की है हमारे प्रियांक मिश्रा साहब, जब हमारे कौटिल्या का ही कहना है कि कोई भी आपको काम कराना है तो साम दाम दंड भेद का प्रयोग करिए। साम दाम दंड भेद का मतलब मैं आपको समझा, साम मतलब होता है समझाना। मतलब हम अगर मान लीजिए मैं मैनेजर हूँ या जनरल मैनेजर हूँ, सरिया मैनेजर हूँ, तो हम अपना काम निकालना है तो समझा करके मुझे अपना काम सब निकाल लेने का एक माध्यम बताया। फिर बोलते हैं कि दाम, दाम मतलब क्या, उसको दीजिए, कुछ लो और दे करके अपना काम निकाल लीजिए। चाहे वो पोल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड हो, डीजीएमएस हो, पुलिस हो, चाहे जो लोग भी। ये हमारा 5,000 वर्ष पहले का अर्थशास्त्र बताता है, नीति बताता है। भेद भेद करके डिफ्रेंशिएट कर दीजिए। अपना काम बनाना है, अगर कोई नहीं सुन रहा है तो उसको अलग कर दीजिए, डिफ्रेंशिएट कर दीजिए। साम दंड, दंड पनिशमेंट, दंड छूट गया, पनिशमेंट दे करके, मतलब उसको धमका करके, डरा करके, स्पाई रख करके अपना काम बना दीजिए। तो ये बड़ा, बहुत देश बड़ा है, बहुत डाइवर्सिटी है यहाँ पर। लेकिन एक चीज अगर हम करें, सोच लें कि हमारा मन, वचन और कर्म से अगर किसी का नुकसान न हो तो वही सबसे बड़ा एथिक्स है। मन से मेरे मन में इच्छा ना हो कि मैं किसी को तकलीफ दूं, वचन मन में किसी को बोलूं तो हमारे बोलने से किसी को तकलीफ ना हो, और कर्म मतलब हमारे काम से किसी को तकलीफ ना हो, कष्ट ना हो। तो यही सबसे बड़ा मोरल वैल्यू है, सबसे बड़ा एथिक्स है। और बड़ा सुंदर तरीके से आयोजन करवाया है। अजय चौहान अभी आए नहीं, बाहर चला गया लगता है, और अच्छा है और आप लोग सभी बहुत यंग लड़के भी यहाँ पर बैठे हैं। एक दो चीज मैं बोलूँगा, जैसे समय पर आना, ये तो कहीं ना कहीं खराब चीज है। 2-3 पार्टिसिपेंट बहुत पीछे आए। जब बोला गया कि 10 साढ़े 10 बजे प्रोग्राम स्टार्ट होगा तो भी शुड कम इन टाइम, क्योंकि आपके चलते बाकी लोगों का भी उतना समय बर्बाद होता है। तो समय पर आइए और अच्छा से काम करिए, और जो भी आपको कंपनी का काम दिया गया है, अगर हम अपने काम को अपने तरीके से, सुचारू ढंग से और सही तरीके से कर लेंगे तो देश की प्रगति में वही एक बड़ा कदम होगा। धन्यवाद।
सर को मैं स्पेशल थैंक यू देता हूँ कि सर शुरू से अभी हमारा स्वच्छता माह चला था 1 अक्टूबर से 31 अक्टूबर तक, आज स्वच्छता माह का क्लोजिंग है, और हमारा विजिलेंस वीक चला है 26 अक्टूबर से 1 नवंबर तक। तो आगे प्रसाद सर स्वच्छता माह में भी और विजिलेंस वीक भी शुरू से हमारे साथ रहे हैं, पूरा इन्होंने हमें एक एक प्रोग्राम में एक उसमें गाइड किया है। तो मैं सर को स्पेशल थैंक्स कहूँगा, और मैं हमारे एपीएम सर नागेश्वर राव सर से थोड़ा सा रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि इस मौके पर 2 शब्द कहेंगे।
आदरणीय वाणिग्रह साहब, प्रसाद साहब और मेरे कोलीग्स, एक अच्छा आयोजन में शामिल होने का मेरे को सौभाग्य मिला, और जो टॉपिक है इंटीग्रिटी के बारे में, जैसे पानीग्रह साहब, प्रसाद साहब और प्रियंका ने अच्छे से आप लोगों को उसके बारे में अवगत किया। जैसा इंटीग्रिटी जैसे मनसा वाचा करना, हम लोग जो सोचता है वही हम बोलना, वही करना। यही से हम लोग का जो इंटीग्रिटी बढ़ता है। और मैं इन्हीं शर्तों के साथ आज का जो ज़्यादा मैं भाषण नहीं देता हूँ आप लोगों को, और उज्ज्वल भविष्य के लिए काम करता हूँ। काफ़ी यंगस्टर्स इस इंडस्ट्री में ज्वाइन किया है और इस इंडस्ट्री का जो भविष्य है आप लोगों के कंधे पर है। मैं पुनः आप सभी को मैं बधाई देता हूँ और मैं अपना वाणी का विराम।
आज के प्रोग्राम में उपस्थित सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स को मैं धन्यवाद कहता हूँ जो अपना टाइम लेके यहाँ पे आए। स्पेशल थैंक्स AFM सर को जिन्होंने बहुत ही शॉर्ट नोटिस में इतना अच्छा प्रेजेंटेशन प्रिपेयर करके हमें इतना डिटेल में समझाया। आके प्रसाद सर को, प्रियांक सर को और AFM सर को थैंक्स कहता हूँ। सभी के लिए लंच का अरेंजमेंट्स किया गया है, आप सब लोग लंच लेके जाएंगे प्लीज़। और जो आज का आपका अटेंडेंस का है वो आपको ऑफिस में और आपका व्हाट्सएप पे फॉरवर्ड कर दिया जाएगा शाम तक। थैंक यू सो मच, थैंक यू फॉर अटेंडिंग द